And so where is the magic? Where do you find the magic? The implication is usually the magic is in specialness. There's normalcy, and the normalcy is not magic, and then there's the specialness somewhere, right, or somewhere over the rainbow, right? And there's the specialness over there. And if I could just get from here to there, where's the bridge? What technique do you have to do to get to this specialness? It's over there, because it ain't here, because this is normalcy and life kind of sucks. But it turns out that's not how it is. It turns out that's completely inaccurate. It turns out that the magic is in reality. The magic is in actuality. The magic is in this concrete universe, this reality, this presence, this world, this system of your being, of all of this. Where else would it be? I mean, say you're a Buddhist and you've spent 20 years learning to meditate, and you've meditated 8 hours a day and blah, 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 and you achieve realization one day, like, the lightning bolt comes down and Mara appears and you do heroic battle with him, and just this whole thing plays itself out, just this whole crazy thing, right? And so here you are, realize, where does that happen? Right? It happens here. Where else could it happen? It has to happen here. And what is it you realize? Well, it has to be this. It's not like something comes from somewhere else, like a comet or a lightning bolt, and lands in your lap, and like, wow, finally, I've been waiting for this to arrive. So in practical terms, all these different yogas, all these different spiritual techniques and spiritual paths involve certain techniques and practices. You're supposed to do certain things, and as a result of that, you're going to get a payoff. You Hatha Yoga, you're supposed to hold your body in certain postures and train yourself to be limber, and be with certain breathings and be with certain ease, and develop this whole thing. And as a result of doing that, it's vaguely implied it's going to be of some benefit. You're going to actually get something. The magic is somehow going to show up as a result of that to some degree, or you learn pranayama, you do this breathing and you control your energy, and you learn your whole system is just tuning and humming away like the bellows of an old vintage pipe organ or something, and it's supposed to you fine tune the energy, and it's supposed to really just like sizzle and tingle, and all of a sudden, as a result of that, you get the magic, you get the payoff, you get the bang for your buck somehow. Or when you learn meditation, different meditation practices are all, they're all over the map. But say you're supposed to meditate, and you're supposed to, hold your mind on a mantra, or you're supposed to clear your mind and find, sort of a thoughtless state, or you're supposed to this, or you're supposed to that. And so, you put your mind in all of these different ways, and that's supposedly how you get your bang for the buck. So, but all of these techniques have in common that they have a focus. So in Hatha Yoga, you're focused on your body. You're focused on moving in a certain way, and you really pay attention to that. Pranayama, you focus on your breath. Meditation, you focus on your mind. So on and so forth. I mean, there's just a bazillion spiritual paths, and they all have their own little target that you sort of orient to. What I teach here is a yoga, and lo and behold, there is a target. There's something you orient to, and what is it? It is this actuality, this reality right here. This that is present as the world, as your being, as your personality, as your thoughts, as your experience, as the universe, as however you used to characterize it, it's just simply this that is here, right? Whatever it is. And it turns out that what this is intrinsically completely beyond what you're used to thinking it is, completely beyond what you usually interpret it as being. And it's only the fact that we buy into these interpretations so heavy-handedly that we don't notice how astounding this actuality is. We think it's normal, we think it's dull, we think it's boring, we think it's limited. Because we're not looking at it, we're just looking at our interpretation of it, we're looking at our story about it, we're looking at our narrative of it, most of which we were taught, more or less by rote, right? By our parents and by society and what have you. And even if we've questioned it, we haven't really questioned it. This is real and this is the world, and the world is, kind of a boat anchor around your neck, you're dragging through life trying to grapple with all these circumstances, and you don't really have all that much control, and you can't really do all that much, and you kind of, you get, death and taxes kind of thing, it's like, well, gee, it's just like, what are you going to do? How are you going to deal with this stuff? And, so we're very used to orienting to what we interpret this to be. And we may not realize, we may not notice the fact, but we're actually not used to orienting to what this actually is. And this yoga consists of learning to orient to this actuality, this presence as it is, which turns out to be entirely beyond what we think of it as being. For example, self-evidently, it's always now. It's never been any other time than now. It's never been any other time than now. Oh, but there's the past, there's the future. These are interpreted into existence. They're imaginary. And experientially, there is only now. Experientially, there's only here. Oh no, there's there and this place and that place and the other place. There's the Andromeda Galaxy, there's New York City. You don't experience those things. Those are concepts. Concepts are interpretations. Your experience is always here. It's always here now. This is self-evident if you look at the actuality of your experience. Experience is always unique. It never repeats itself. What you experience in any moment, you've never experienced exactly that before, and you're never going to experience exactly that again. And this is, again, self-evident. It's completely self-evident. What you're seeing right now, you have never seen before exactly in terms of all the details that are there. What you're thinking right now, you never thought before exactly in terms of all the details that are there. What you're feeling right now, you've never felt before exactly in terms of all the details that are there. And it's already gone. It's already something else. Because the next instant presents a subtly or grossly different panorama of qualities, right? So, these are just very coarse and obvious examples of the way in which the actuality of your experience deviates from the imaginary interpretation of it. Oh no, there's space, there's other places, there's time, there's the past, there's the future, there's causality, there's this, there's that, there's the other, all of which we basically imagine into existence, and then we assume it's true, we assume it's accurate. And that's fine, so we do that. Cool. But even as we're doing that, this actuality doesn't go away. What this is here. It is what it is. And you can be imagining things about it 7 ways from Sunday, and yet the actuality doesn't go anywhere. It's right here. So it's available for study. It's available for investigation. You can look at it. You can check it out. You can be with it and try and see what it is. And of course, this is very difficult if you're trying to see from within the context of what you think you already know it is. Oh no, this is the objective world. I'm in my body's just a little thing over here. I'm in this big objective world which is out there, and it's not me. And there's the past, and there's the future, and there's big space, and there's blah blah, all of the usual sort of consensus worldview that, maybe most people or a lot of people buy into, or whatever, whatever worldview you happen to assume is objectively true. But you can look and see what actually is true if you let yourself be with the actuality of your experience outside, at least to some degree, outside of the context of what you're so used to holding it to be. This can be challenging, of course, because the way we hold this to be, typically we hold it unconscious. We don't know we're doing it. We just assume it's true. It's just like that. Well, this is the world, duh. Anyone says this isn't the world, you think they're nuts. Right? Anyone says, oh, there's no past and no future, you think they're nuts. Because you just unconsciously and automatically assume, no, this is how it is, this is real. What are you talking about? What kind of bullshit is this? What kind of a nutcase are you? What do you mean, no past, no future? Have you ever experienced a past? Have you ever experienced a future? You always experience now, don't you? And now is very interesting because it always slips away. It's gone. By the time, as soon as you've experienced it, it's already something else. It's already gone. So now it's like standing on an ice floe that's continually melting out from under you, or something. I don't know. That's a pretty weird analogy, but but this is a pretty weird circumstance we're in, and this is the whole point: is to notice how weird this is. Notice how bizarre this actuality of your experience actually is, in contrast to what let's say most people or a lot of people usually hold it to be. Self-evidently, nothing exists unless you're experiencing it. Well, that kind of contradicts a lot of consensus worldview right there, but it's completely self-evident. How do you know? If I said, there's aliens landed and invaded and took over America 3 weeks ago, you'd say, oh yeah? Interesting. What's the evidence? Show me. By evidence you mean experience. You want to see the spaceship. You want to at least see a news story. You want to have something showing up in your direct experience that can serve as a basis for supporting that argument, for supporting that assertion, as opposed to just some guy saying it. The pink elephants have beamed down from the planet Tetra onto this roof, and they're up there right now setting up a circus. It's like, okay, cool. Show me the circus. Show me the tent, and maybe we can talk. Until then, it's just a lot of bullshit. It's hot air. Okay, show me yesterday. Somebody show me yesterday. How can you do it? Show me New York. Show me the Andromeda Galaxy. Show me this room existing when I close my eyes. You close your eyes, this room disappears. It's self-evident experience. You go to sleep, the whole world disappears. Your body disappears. It's just completely obvious. And yet we are expert at glossing over this actuality into, oh no, it's just, it's an artifact of the way my physiology is, and I close my eyes and the eyes can no longer see, but it's actually still there, and so on and so forth. Well, maybe yes, maybe no, but you can't verify it, or can you? What can you verify? What you can verify is what you can experience. What can you experience? What is experience actually? This is the essence, the lifeblood, and the practice of the yoga that I present, that I advocate. What is this? What is experience? What is it directly? What can you see that it is? What can it show you that it is? And what are the implications? Maybe the implications are very interesting. Maybe this isn't a dull, boring hell of normalcy with civilization going south at this, at almost the speed of light. With pathetically stupid politicians running us all into the ground, so we're all going to be dead in a few years or something, right? Robbing garbage cans or something, who knows? Maybe it isn't that. Maybe it's something entirely different. But you can't know if you don't look. And to just assume that the way you've been told it is, the way you've been sold it is, the way you unconsciously hold it to be is true, is simplistic, it's naive. It's like people that believe what politicians say. I mean, anyone with half a brain knows politicians are like, they spout bullshit in order to try and manipulate people to achieve certain ends that are to the advantage of the people that are supporting them. And this is, it doesn't take a lot of brains to figure that out. How about objectivity? How about an objective world? There's an objective world. Everyone knows there's an objective world. If anyone says it's not an objective world, they're in that case. It's like, lock them up, throw away the key. Give them a lot of Thorazine or something. The objective world exists because it exists within your experience. So your experience is the objective world. And what appears in your experience is the objective world. When you go to sleep, what's the objective world? It's this weird cloud of what? Of just weird stuff, right? I mean, from the waking condition, we can't even relate to what it even looks like. We can't remember it. It's so non-linear. It's just weird tingles or something. There's no, your body isn't particularly there. The world isn't particularly there. Nothing that makes any sense or you can talk about or you get a handle on is particularly there. It's just sort of weird feelings and vibes and moods and flavors and whatever. Right? You go into a dream and all of a sudden the objective world is what? It's whatever it happens to look like. All of a sudden you're in Japan or something, or or you're flying, or it's this or it's that. And all of a sudden, and that's what the world looks like, and there's no evidence to the contrary in that context, is there? Then you wake up and here you are, and it's like, oh, but this is real. Well, maybe yes, maybe no. What does that mean? What's really going on there? You experience it. Oh, but this is the same old. Is this the same? Do you experience the same thing every moment? Or does it continually change? A dream continually changes. Does this continually change? Anyway, I'm kind of getting carried away here with the diatribe. But the basic point that I would like to make is that by investigating what your experience is directly, outside the context of the assumptions that you usually make about it, you may discover some very surprising aspects. You may discover some very surprising qualities that are self-verifyingly present in the actual fact of your experience that very radically deviate from the consensus reality view of what is going on here. I mean, of course, we all know the consensus reality view. Not that everyone believes it, but you are a consciousness that somehow is a byproduct of biochemical energies in your body, and you are basically in your body this little delicate flame or whatever the heck you are. And as long as your body's healthy, this little precarious flame is somehow semi-okay. And so your body exists in this vast world of other things that are not your body, that are not you, that are more or less threatening and more or less dangerous. And so you live in a very precarious balance of trying to cope, trying to kind of keep a low profile or find some kind of position of invulnerability where the world isn't going to squish you or shoot you or throw you in jail or give you some horrible disease or whatever, right? I mean, this is roughly speaking, maybe, I mean, arbitrarily, let's suppose that maybe this is kind of the typical consensus reality view. And then if you look at experience, is this verified? Are you in your body? No. Where's your body? Your body is in your experience. In fact, in point of experience, your body, how do you know you have a body? Because it's appearing in experience. How do you know there's a world? Because it's appearing in experience. Well, that's kind of interesting. So my experience is supposed to be in my body, the body is supposed to be in the world, and yet the world appears in my experience and my body appears in my experience. It's, how does that work? How do you sort that out? How do you parse that? And there's supposed to be this vast space and this vast time, and extending from forever ago to forever in the future, and this vast space extending for billions and billions of light years, God knows whatever that means, right? And yet, experientially, what is there? There's whatever is in your experience. And where is that? It's here. I experience this body. Where am I experiencing it? Here, in this field of experience. I experience this room. Where am I experiencing it? Here, in this field of experience. If I go outside and look at the moon, where am I experiencing it? Here, in this field of experience. So experientially, the moon, when I'm experiencing it, is in this field of experience. Where is it right now? Where's the moon? I don't know. It's an assertion, it's a claim, it's a fantasy. There's a moon out there. If I went outside and looked at it, I would see it. Well, maybe so. But I'm not seeing it now. Right? So, how does that work? What's going on with that? Anyway, the point is to notice what your experience actually consists of, and how that contrasts with what we've been told it is, what it usually has been asserted to be, and what we've been taught that it is. And maybe there's some advantage in doing that. Maybe what's going on here is a whole lot cooler and a whole lot more interesting, and actually a whole lot more advantageous for what this actually is than the consensus reality version, where we're just pathetic little monkeys running around waiting to get squished. Yoga of Radiant Presence is about one thing, and that is reality, actuality. What is it that is actual? What is it that is real? Right here, this is real. What is it that is real? Is this building we're in? Is it real? There's all these people sitting around. Are they real? There's this carpet. There's your personality. There's your thoughts. There's your feelings. There's emotions. There's memories. They're all real. But none of them are actually that. None of them are actually what you think they are. No matter how sophisticated and subtle an understanding you have of what any of this is, it's wrong. Simply because this actuality right here is completely ungraspable, completely unanalyzable, completely irrational, essentially magical. It cannot be made sense of. It cannot be encapsulated in any kind of a description, no matter how sophisticated, brilliant, and elaborate. It cannot be done because of what this is. So, we have this very strange situation that this actuality is entirely transcendental. And yet, we're all very expert at holding it to be this and that, and interpreting it as being our lives, our environment, our history, what we're interested in doing, what we hope to accomplish, our hopes and fears, all of this incredible, elaborate narration, this incredible, elaborate scenario of interpretation that is entirely erroneous, entirely wrong. Not just a little wrong. It's completely wrong. There's no portion of it which is correct. What this is, what is happening here, is inconceivably strange. It's inconceivably weird. this is easily seeable. And only if you let this be what it is and be with it as it is, can you ever engage with reality accurately, clearly. As long as you retain addiction to interpretation, addiction to relating to this presence in terms of your interpretations, you are in delusion, you are in confusion, you are like the land of the lotus eaters or something. You're basically a crazy person. You're like a psychotic. You're believing things to be the case that are not true. So, Yoga of Radiant Presence is all about one thing, which is recognizing this actuality as it is. Recognizing what is actually here, how it is, in every aspect of this, in contradistinction to what we're used to interpreting it as being. So it's simple recognition, just a matter of recognizing how to affect this, how do you do this yoga, how do you affect this recognition? Well, it's very simple. Attend to the very precise details of your experience, your actual experience of this actuality right here, and see what is there, see what you find. And you will immediately see that it does not conform to your narrations, it does not conform to your interpretations. And in that verification, you will no longer need to be addicted to approaching it in terms of your interpretations. You will be able to let it show you what it is. You will be able to discover the intrinsic infinity, which this actually is, the intrinsic unresolvability, the intrinsic openness that this actuality, it actually is. It is that. It is made of that. It consists of that. I mean, not in those terms, of course, because those are analyses, and so of course, as analyses, they're inaccurate. But nonetheless, they are indicative, they're evocative of what this actually is. So, I call this yoga of radiant presence because radiant presence is a loose and sloppy euphemism that rather nicely indicates and evokes what is actually here, what this actually is. What this actually is could poetically be said to be a shining forth from infinity, or from nothingness.
Excuse me?
A shining forth from nothingness. Very much like a dream is. You know, we all have every night we go to sleep and we dream, and you know, there's no basis for any of it, right? It's not, you can dream of anything. You can dream of going to New York or flying in a rocket ship or, obviously, anything whatsoever. And it's baseless. It's not based on anything. There's no starting point for it. It's just basically cooked up out of nothing. And this experience is exactly the same, it turns out. It is a radiance, a shining forth, a presentation. And it is actual, it's real, it's present. It is. So there is this actual presence, there is an actual radiance, and there's nothing else. It's completely baseless. It's based on nothing. It doesn't come from anything. And this is difficult to fathom because the presentation is so intricate, it's so detailed, it's so, self-supporting in terms of the implied logic and the implied structure of what seems to be happening. The flow of time, cause and effect, history, physics, all of this amazing interlocking phenomena and event, and it all sort of works together like a glorious jigsaw puzzle. and yet it's basically being improvised in real time, essentially fantastically, very much like a dream. But theory aside, you are seeing this actuality right now. In fact, you've never seen anything else. It's impossible to see anything else because nothing else exists. This that is real, this that you may call your experience, is real, is actual, is the soul reality, is the soul actuality. You cannot find any actuality, any reality outside your experience. You know, and that's a no-brainer. Where would you look? You know, how do you look outside your experience? Well, it's a riddle. It's a joke. It's philosophy. You know, it's how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? It's an absurdity. Experience is actual. Nothing else whatsoever is actual, empirically. And the notion that anything other than that is the case is just a notion which happens with an experience. Mysteriously, it just appears, like everything just appears. We'll go into great detail, some tricks of a lot of specific things, specific aspects, let's say, or jumping off points that you can play with your experience in order to explore this amazing condition. But some of them are the way in which things happen, things appear. You know, right now there are probably thoughts in your mind. Where are they coming from? What puts them there? And they're gone. They don't linger. There's absolutely no persistence. It's instantaneously. You know, it appears and it disappears, and the appearance and the disappearance are one. It's not like the thoughts sort of stick around for a short duration and hang out for a while and then decide to disappear. It's not quite like that, is it? It's like a real time. It's like a wave continually breaking, and in its breaking, in its arising, is its falling continually. Thought is like this. Vision is like this. You know, if you look very carefully, you'll notice that what you see is instantaneous and is completely gone forever. In that instant, in the instant of the seeing, it's gone. And where does it come from? You know, every instant you see something you've never seen before. It's impossible to have the same experience of vision twice. It's impossible. It cannot be done. It's never happened before. It's never going to happen. Where does this uniqueness come from? It just, bang, it's here. It's already here. Every instant, it's just here. Right at this moment, you're seeing exactly what you happen to be seeing. You didn't plan it. It wasn't contrived. There wasn't an elaborate mechanism cooking it up and spitting it out. Just, bang, it's here. And in that here-ness, it's gone. So, you know, this is again, you can, if you are sensitively with the real-time, call it flow of your experience, this will be readily apparent. The instantaneity and spontaneity of experience and the absolute non-durational nature of it. It has no persistence. It has no duration whatsoever. It may seem to, because its refresh rate is instantaneous, and in many cases the deviation from what you had apparently been experiencing seems rather slight from what you were experiencing previously. But rather slight is a euphemism for entirely different. You know, almost the same is a euphemism for entirely different. So in actual fact, every instant you perceive something you've never perceived before that is completely different than anything you've ever perceived. So continuity is an argument. You know, continuity is a kind of an imaginary creation of averages. You know, well, what I'm seeing now is pretty close to what I was seeing a nanosecond ago, and pretty close to what I was seeing a nanosecond before that. But again, pretty close is a euphemism for entirely different. So, you know, we can notice this. So that, you know, in practical terms, one of the secrets of this yoga is to be precise, be very detailed, be with your experience very, very intimately. This is not a matter of painting it with sort of broad strokes and sloppiness and, oh, yeah, you know. No, really be with your experience. Check it out. Really check it. Be a scientist. assume that everything you know is wrong, and here's this astounding phenomenon occurring, and it's up to you to reinvent the wheel and figure out what it is. What is happening? How is it happening? Everything you've been told is wrong. Just sort of assume that, even if it's not true. Assume everything you've been told is wrong. Be with this actuality, and see if it'll show you what it is. And your biggest challenge, of course, will be that subliminally you think you already know what it is. Subliminally, you have a lifelong history of knowing what this is, of thinking what this is, of oh, this is light, I'm in my body, we're in a room, we're in space, this is the world, we're in a world. And, these holdings, holding these interpretations unquestionably to be objectively true, is something we typically do very subliminally, very unconsciously. So it's difficult to challenge these kinds of assumptions because we don't even know they're there. We don't even know they're assumptions. It's just sort of a feeling tone of certainty that this is real. And it is real. I mean, this is the trick that enables delusion to persist. It is real. It's just not actual. Yeah, it's true there is a field of vision. Yeah, it's true there is a field of thought. Yeah, it's true there is sound. Yeah, it's true there is an apparent sequence of events. It's true all of these things. But if you look closely, none of that is actually accurate. We don't look closely enough. The entire edifice of delusion, the entire edifice of misinterpretation, in a sense, the entire edifice of suffering is upheld by not looking closely enough. It's that simple. If you look closely enough, none of that stuff can stand up. Because the very nature of experience reveals what it is when you look at it. It's not hidden. It's not camouflage. It's not even not obvious. It's completely obvious. But we typically don't bother to look because we already think we know. And then we're caught up in what we think we know. And, hey, what are you doing today? Oh, I got to go. I'm going down to the store and going to do this. And, oh, I got a call from so-and-so. And, hey, how was your night last night? Oh, blah, blah. And so we're caught up in all of this level of narration. And since that's distracting our attention, we aren't really looking at what is here. We don't question it because we think we know. We skip over that part and go on to the juicy bits of our soap opera. Go on to the juicy bits of, what we want, what we're avoiding, enacting our personality, trying to conceal our flaws. I mean, all the mechanisms of human personality with which people usually superficially approach their lives. And all of that is just a distraction from really seeing what is here. It's not hidden. It's actually very easy to see. It's hard to, I often say reality is very easy to see. Delusion is very hard to peel yourself away from. It's the problem is not seeing reality. The problem is our addiction to delusion. So we don't bother. We don't get off our butts. And usually, if we do, even to a partial extent of, trying to be spiritual, trying to meditate, trying to look at things, it's just a relatively superficial lifestyle choice where we're, I'm a meditator, or I'm a this, or I'm a that, and that just fits into our soap opera, as opposed to really stepping outside of any framework whatsoever, just nakedly into this actuality, and look and see what it is. So this is the nature, this is the essence of this yoga. These 4 days, I invite you to do nothing else. I invite you to really be with your experience. It's all about you. It's about you, how you are with your experience. This is not excuse me. Sometimes my throat cramps up and I won't be able to speak for a few minutes. This is not a group endeavor. There's no group here. There's you. There's your experience. That's the only thing that is here. That's the only thing that is relevant. That's the only thing that matters. You know, how are you with it? And every instant is a fork in the road. Every instant you can be with what is here, or you can skip over it and go into an interpretation, basically a fantasy. Every instant, that choice is, you're always at this fork in the road. So every instant is an opportunity to see. Or every instant is an opportunity to not see. And it's really doable. It's really a matter of doing it. The yoga of radiant presence is discovering what experience actually is. Period. The only spiritual problem whatsoever is if one does not know what this is. And the only solution to the absolute pinnacle, the absolute essence of reality, the essence of spirituality, is discovering what this is. It's that simple. It's that simple. Either being with this as it is, or missing it. It's that simple. It's very, very, very simple. Just one thing. Once this actual condition is discovered, one's previously held misinterpretation of what this is disproved and gradually relinquished. So, this condition is actual. This is not something that you need to aspire to, or try to create, or try to achieve or get from outside yourself, or even find. The condition that is in question here is actual. It's right here. It's concrete. In fact, it's the only concrete thing there is, so to speak. Not that it's a thing per se, but so this is an actual condition, and it can be discovered. This condition can be discovered, and once one discovers it, it becomes obvious what it is, and it becomes obvious the way and the extent to which your previous misinterpretations of it are inaccurate, are not real, are just illusion, they're fantasy, they're nothing. They're just like the dreams of a crazy person. There's nothing there whatsoever. There's no basis for the misinterpretations. They're just spun out of fantasy. Okay. The two words, radiant presence. Presence refers to actuality, being, reality. This is. Okay? Now, if you try to pin down exactly what that means or what that refers to is impossible, but it's not important. The important point is that this is actual, this is real. So that's, in other words, reality is real. I mean, it sounds trivial to say that, but it's actually very profound. This is actually real. This is the reality right here. This is it. Okay? And radiance refers to spontaneous, active, unstoppable presentation or shining forth of apparent experiential qualities that are one with presence. Okay, let's take the end of that first. So it's one with presence. It's not like there's some presence and then over here and then there's some radiance over there. The presence is radiance. The radiance is presence. You can't, if you're going to go looking for the presence, you have to look at the radiance. If you're going to go looking for the radiance, you have to look at the presence. And there's no actual radiance and no actual presence, of course, because then it would be definable, and it's not actually like that. So this, inaccurate referring to this actuality as radiant presence or as presence and radiance is a jumping off point. It's a jumping off point for inquiry and investigation to notice the one condition that is actually here. That is not actually presence or radiance, but radiant presence indicates it rather evocatively. So radiance and presence are both indicate one thing. It's not like there's radiance and presence. So when you feel this presence. I mean, you can feel that this is present, right? It's completely obvious. This is present. You're actually feeling the radiance. Right? You can feel the radiance. You're experiencing the radiance for everything. You're experiencing light. You're experiencing sound. You're experiencing thought. You're experiencing everything you experience is essentially radiance. It's sort of sparkly energy appearing in your experience, and it is present. And the presence and the radiance, you can't find presence apart from radiance. You can't find radiance apart from presence. This actuality actually is this. It's spontaneous. It's just bang, it appears. You can't find any mechanism. You can't find any preparation. You don't find any rehearsal or any scripts or any maps or plans. It just bang. Every instant just appears in all its inconceivable detail. Right? And forever. It's active. It never stops. There's no off switch. You can't stop this. You can't shut down presence. You can't shut down the radiance. You can't shut down the presentation. It always looks like something. Always. Even if it looks like nothing. Say you're in general anesthesia or something. That's the something that it happens to look like in that context. That's it. So it's unstoppable presentation shining forth of apparent experiential qualities. So there's all of these qualities, right? Color, brightness, sound, pitch, timbre, texture. I mean, you couldn't possibly make a finite list of the qualities that are designatable. Basically, you start with a dictionary, and every word in there is designating or arguing for a quality or a set of qualities, and it's not even scratching the surface. Like, how many shades of red are there? It's inconceivable. It's literally infinite. So there are these experiential qualities, and they are apparent. You can't ever find what they actually are. You can't find them, and yet they are clearly apparent. And we'll get into the unfindability a little later. But so there's these experiential qualities, and all you can say about these qualities is that they're being experienced. Right? Here they are. Here's color. Here's sound. I mean, it's undeniable. That's part of the presence. These qualities are present. They are radiating. They are shining forth right here, right now, as all of this amazing show here, this amazing, inconceivably detailed field of experience, right? Radiant presence is just experience. That's all, nothing else. This is very matter of fact. This is not even esoteric. It's just this experience right here. This is what all the fuss is about. Just your normal, everyday experience. The fact of this experience that is here now. Same as always, right? Same old, same old. This is what all the fuss is about. This. Just this. This is where to look for the treasure. You want the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? Your normal experience is the rainbow. That's where you look. The essence of the yoga of radiant presence consists of actively recognizing the actuality of radiant presence as it is. So that's pretty straightforward. This is about recognizing something that is already the case, that is already happening, and recognizing it as it is, letting, not applying analysis or preconceptions or expectations to it, just, recognize this as it actually is. And it is being as it is. It is being what it is, so that's already fulfilled. That's already completely filled in. So all you need to do is notice that, recognize this actuality in just the way that it is. And this is where being with it with great detail, with great presence, with great precision comes into it, because that's how you get to the as it is part. Glossing over into delusion is ignoring the as it is part. You may be recognizing radiant presence, but you're You're skipping the as it is part and filling in your own script. You're filling in your own interpretation. You have all this elaborate storyline about what's going on here, and none of it's true. It's not as it is. Your starting point may be fine. Your starting point is, here's this, it's all based on this, evidentiary field of experience, but you're not stopping, you're not letting it show you what it is. You're adding to it. You're saying, oh, but this is this, and that's that, and this is the other, and this is happening, and that happened, and this is what it all means, and gosh, I'm screwed. Sucks being a human. And it's all a misinterpretation. It's all a big misunderstanding. So, actively recognizing the actuality of radiant presence as it is, and that it is comprehensive. There's nothing else. This field of your normal experience is the totality of reality. It's the whole shooting match. There's no God outside it. There's no future. There's no past. There's nothing. There's just this simple fact is the only fact. And every fact whatsoever is within it. It's an implication of it. It's an aspect of it. So it is the mother lode. It is everything and anything whatsoever is from it, in it, of it, is it. So it is comprehensive. It's the sole constitution of any and all phenomena. That's just a reiteration of that. It is independent. It's based on and existing in nothing but itself. It's not coming from anywhere else. It's not sitting on anything else. It's not some device or mechanism over here that's somehow doing it and churning it out. It just is. It bootstraps itself up out of what? It's just miraculous. You can't say. It's just, here it is, and it's not from anything. It's not to anything. It's not related to anything. It has no dependence on any other condition or status or actuality whatsoever. It is dependent on itself. It's doing itself. How's that possible? It's absurd. It's miraculous. Yes, it's absurd. It's miraculous. Yes. But see the truth of that. See the unfindability of anything else. Anyway, and each of these little things is a sort of a seed that is endlessly expandable. But don't worry about that for now. We'll just touch on all this stuff, and this is what we're going to be living with for the next 4 days, rather intensively, or at least you're invited to. It's up to you. No other actuality whatsoever. Can't find anything else. This is it. The practice of this yoga consists of noticing the actual aspects of one's experience. And the notice actual is capitalized there. So again, and noticing is being defined as a conceptual experiential exploration. Now you notice I didn't say non-conceptual, because it's not, this experiential exploration does not exclude concepts. But it's not based on concepts, it's not oriented to concepts. It basically, the concepts are irrelevant, one way or the other. Whether they're there or not, whether you're thinking or not is not the point. That's just part of the stew of this experiential exploration. So the practice of this yoga consists of noticing actual aspects of one's experience. That's the entire yoga right there. So notice what is actually here. Notice what this actually is. Notice what anything actually is. Notice what any portion of your experience actually is. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your starting point is. You will find the same thing, because there's only one thing here. There's only one actuality, and it exists in one way. So anywhere you look, you will find. It doesn't matter where you look. It doesn't matter what your starting point is. It doesn't matter what your jumping off point is. And now I list some some suggestions of some notions to play with that are arguable aspects of one's experience. Of course, since they're delineatable, they aren't accurate. They're not true. But these can be jumping off points, sort of diving boards that you can jump off of into the actuality of experience and find out the way what is actually here is sort of a priming the pump with some of these kinds of notions. It itself spontaneously perceives this presentation with absolute intimacy. So what's seeing? This is manifestly being seen, being perceived. What's perceiving it? Where is the perceiver? Is there a perceiver sitting over somewhere in the back of your head, or on a shelf somewhere, or up in the sky or somewhere? You go looking for a perceiver, you can't find one. And yet, perceiving is clearly happening, let's say. Maybe. So that perceiving is happening is an aspect of this. So since this is one thing, if there's perceiving happening, this one thing is doing that. Right? And this presentation, in other words, the vast spectrum of experiential characteristics, right, is being perceived with absolute intimacy. Nothing is blocked. Nothing is hidden. Nothing is concealing anything else. It's all completely nakedly displayed, completely nakedly accessible. There's nothing that's actually not available for exploration, not available for going into experientially, let's say. Okay? There is an infinite, ubiquitous, fractal meaningfulness embodied in this. Okay? This is not just some inert event, some mechanical pile of marbles or corks that someone left lying around. There's an inconceivable intelligent structure, meaningfulness. All human meaningfulness is just a paltry scratching of the surface. It's a profound meaningfulness that is found in every minuscule or macro aspect of this inconceivable functionality that's being enacted here. So this is not inert, this is not dead, this is not mechanical, this is not boring or dull. On the contrary, it's pregnant with infinite meaningfulness, infinite intelligence, infinite innuendo and implication. And this meaningfulness is fractal. It doesn't have parts. Anywhere you look, you find the whole thing. It's a touchstone, a touching point for this whole edifice of meaningfulness that just spreads out and includes everything. It's not partial, it's not structural, where there's this has meaning and that has meaning. It's like, no, you touch any portion of it and the meaningfulness is just, the meaningfulness that's revealed there is the same meaningfulness that's revealed everywhere in different sort of, call it ratios or aspects or proportions of dominance of qualities and what have you. I mean, obviously it's beyond analysis. So, it presents as infinitely differentiated without ever departing from itself. This is very interesting. There's all of these qualities. Look at, how many colors, how many shades of color are there? How many intensities of light are there? How many different qualities of thought are there? How many, anything. It's stupefying. Even within one small portion or one small aspect of the field of your experience, that is infinite. So then you start adding other portions, and that's infinite, and more portions, and they're infinite. And if you start looking very closely, you'll find infinite fields of experience. As humans, we're used to, in terms of consensus reality, we're very used to classifying, the five sense fields, and this mind is a sense field, and so on. So there's, we kind of consist of 6 sense fields. It's hogwash. It's bullshit. We are an infinite field of infinite qualities, and most of them, the vast majority of them, are not classified within the 6 senses. There's all these subtle vibes, tingles and weirdness. There's nothing but quality. And these qualities are just an infinite field, and this field is the field of your experience. Yeah. Typically, we straitjacket ourselves by, oh no, there's only 6 senses, it's only 5 senses, and then there's mine, which isn't really anything, and that's all everything is, and here I am, and I'm just this limited being. The evidence against that is laughably absurd. Yeah. It's just infinity piled upon infinity and piled upon infinity, just in a small portion of any of it. It's mind-boggling. And so very quickly, and just looking at this infinite differentiation, this just completely devastates any notion of smallness or being contained or being stuck in something. It's laughable. And it never departs from itself. All this differentiation is just this radiance. It's just this presence. It's not like, there's, an infinite number of different qualities, so they're all just, so that means there's an infinite number of different things, and God, how am I ever going to sort that out? It's just one thing here. It's one thing, one reality, one actuality, this radiant presence. And miraculously, and it's completely inconceivable, there's no way you can wrap your head around it, it presents as infinite differentiation. How weird is that? It's like a dream, You can dream of absolutely anything, and yet every single thing you experience is just dream. It never departs from dream. So whatever presents never departs from the soul actuality, the soul presence, the soul event that is here, that is actually experienced. Okay? It is transcendental. That is, it is entirely irrational, unanalyzable, unresolvable, essentially miraculous. It has no parts, no process, no aspects, no mechanism. There's no way you can figure out how this is happening. There's no way. It can't be done. So this is irrational. You can't analyze it. It's not amenable to analysis. It's unresolvable. You can't actually even find what anything is. The closer you look at it, it morphs and what you thought you were looking at turns out to be something else, and then you look at that, and that turns out to be something else, and you look at that, and that turns out... And so you're just going down this endless rabbit hole of morphing experiential qualities forever. You never get to the bottom. And none of it bears any relationship to where you thought you started. So this seeming simplicity, on the contrary, is just endlessly elusive, endlessly slippery, endlessly miraculous. This is what I refer to as transcendental. It transcends any mode of approaching it. It transcends any mode of trying to explain it or capture it or deconstruct it or anything like that. Okay, etc. This is just a random tossing off of notions that are interesting jumping off points to begin to look at this. And again, none of them are accurate, none of them are true. Because they're sayable, the actuality is not that. But they're good, they may be good jumping off points just to sort of play with, to look at it in terms of that, and then see what the actuality actually is when you sort of start from that as a premise. And of course the actuality will very rapidly transcend your starting point, as it inevitably will with anything. Okay. These aspects are not discrete actualities, but are points of investigation into the discovery of this soul unique transcendental condition. So that's they're just they're teasers. Yeah. It's like you go to the movie theater and they play a short, which is not the movie, but it's supposed to get you all hyped up about it. That's what these are. These are like the shorts. The shorts, the reality shorts. Okay. Having discovered and explored the nature of this actuality by noticing, one rests in it, as one always has. This is not anything new. You've always been this. You always will be this. I mean, literally always, as a matter of fact. Nothing is changing. Nothing is coming. Nothing is going. And so in discovering what this is, nothing new happens. You simply are home, where you've always been, and yet you recognize it. You know, you get to appreciate it, you get to enjoy it, you get to kind of look around and go, yeah, pretty cool. Instead of looking around and going, God, my life sucks. You know, you can do that too. If you have a taste for the Baroque. Okay, now here's a footnote about noticing, which you remember I defined earlier as aconceptual, experiential. Aconceptual, experiential exploration. Noticing is possible because it's already occurring. In other words, how do you notice? How do you be with the experience afresh? Well, it's already occurring. You're already with your experience fresh. Every instant is a moment of noticing. Already, always has been. It's a moment of, wow, what's happening here? What's here? Every moment you're being startled. Every moment you're being surprised. Every moment you're being, shown newness. You're being, the subtlety and the open dimensionality of actuality is being clearly displayed to you. So this has always been occurring. This is not anything new. So noticing is possible. In other words, how do you do a conceptual experiential exploration when you theoretically are in the habit of not doing it? Well, in actuality, you always have been doing it. You've always been doing the yoga of radiant presence. What this is about is getting efficient about it. Experience is that anyway. Experience is the spiritual path. I mean, being lost in delusion lifetime after lifetime and suffering and being, all these pathetic life forms saying, why me? All of that is this path. It's a self-correcting path. But it has a very long arc. This is a trick. This is a trick, potentially. Could be. It's a trick that may be a shortcut that enables you to get a little more efficient about jump-starting the process by engaging in it more with a much quicker refresh rate than these lifetime-long diversions into dullness. So, noticing is possible because it's already occurring. The spontaneous perceiving aspect of experience having an inherent recursive nature. It actually experiences itself, experiencing itself. In other words, this experiencing is looking at itself experiencing. Of course, what else could it look at? It's like when you dream at night, the dreaming is looking at the dreaming. Looking at the dream being dream, because there's nothing else to look at. So it's not like you're trapped in a chair somewhere being forced to experience your experience and you're sitting over here and the experience is on the contrary, you always have been experiencing yourself, experiencing this. And this, endlessly recursive, if you want to try and do head games with it, you can imagine just sort of an infinite loop of an infinite regress of it, experiencing itself. But, so the spontaneous perceiving aspect, the fact that there is this miraculous function of perceiving itself, perceiving this actuality is perceiving itself. It consists of a perceiving of itself, let's say. There's nothing here but perceiving itself. Just like in a dream, there's nothing there but perceiving the dream, which is perceiving itself, basically. It has this inherent recursive nature. It experiences itself, experiencing itself. Because there's nothing else to experience. What else is it going to experience? What else is it going to look at? Can't look outside. Outside of what? Where? What outside? Where do you find that? So it can notice that it is doing that, since it already is. This is the magic trick that enables noticing to happen, because it already is. It's not like you need to develop some new power, some new functionality. Well, here I've been lost in dullness and lost in my fantasies. How am I going to muster up this amazing trick of being able to actually look at myself experiencing, see what's here? Well, you already are. So it's actually very easy. You just notice that. Notice that noticing is happening. And how can you do that? Because you already are. So it gets, obviously, if you sort of go around that merry-go-round a few times, it gets sort of silly. But nonetheless, in practice, this is something that we can take advantage of. Okay, now I'm going to go back to our friend Jesus. Now, this is my paraphrase of a quote from the Gospel of Thomas, which supposedly is a word of Jesus Christ. Seek until you find. When you find, you will be troubled. Then you will marvel and rule over the all. Okay. So seek until you find is pretty clear. Seek until you find. Look at this, check it out, and see what it is. Look and see what this is as it actually is, as opposed to as you've been in the habit of thinking of it as being. So this is doable. You will find. You will start to notice what this is. You will be troubled. Because this is some weird shit. What's going on here is fucking weird. It's beyond bizarre. It's beyond, it's beyond crazy. You know, people get locked up for a lot less than this kind of stuff. You know, so this is perplexing, considering that, you know, we spent most of our lives being invested in consensus reality to one degree or another, and here we are getting direct, experiential, factual, obvious verification that no, there's something really, 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 really fucking weird going on here. So this is perplexing, because again, there's a habit, this long habit of thinking you're you and thinking you have your life, and even as you're doing this investigation, everyone else will think you're you and think you're having a life, because you kind of look the same way as you always did. Right, you're just this guy going through, you know, you still eat and sleep and interact and whatever, right? So it seems like it's all just hunky-dory normal. Well, here we are, we're all in this together, we're all just folks, you know, we're all human beings. And yet you're like, bang, you're off the deep end. I mean, you're just you're in a very, very strange perspective when you begin to really see what this is. And this is perplexing because, again, you may find yourself kind of in two worlds, where you're in the human world and you're in a world where, you know, people are interacting with you more or less according to some sort of a pseudo-consensus reality. And here you are, you've gone beyond. You're just nowhere near in that kind of a context. And yet you are. You still are. You still have a job. You still have your family. You know, you still have all these things, whatever. You know, still whatever, you know, whatever happens, so-called, and so on. So this is a strange thing, and it can be troubling, it can be perplexing, it can be pretty weird to sort of really get real about this, to get real with this stuff and go, my God, this is not philosophy. This is not some trippy meditation experiences. This is reality is really, really bizarre, and no one knows it but me and a handful of other people. Mm-hmm. And maybe they don't know it, they just are pretending they do. How can I know what they know? So you're basically all alone, which you are. You always have been all alone. There's nothing here but your field of experience. You never have been. And of course you see that too. You discover you alone exist. And that's pretty bizarre. Because everyone else doesn't go away. Just because you exist. So anyway, so this can present some interesting conundrums, shall we say, when you begin to really get that this stuff is real. You're ready to say, wait a minute, this is for real. This is not just like amusing mind games and trippy like philosophy games. There's something very, very, very strange going on here, and it's me, and no one else seems to know. Okay. But it wins, it trumps, because it's real, it's actual. And all this consensus reality stuff is just crazy people. It's wrong, it's fantasy, it's delusion, it's just not true. It's not like you need to go out and proselytize and tell everyone, hey, you're a crazy person. Because they wouldn't hear you. Because crazy people don't know they're crazy. So, it's just how it is. So you find yourself in a very strange situation where you're living in a real world, and there's all of these apparitions that are presenting all of this semantic patterning that is complete fantasy, complete delusion. Oh, okay. you. But you will marvel and you will rule over the all, because you discover that you are this miraculousness. There is no separate you. There is no human being. There is no sentient being. There is no separate being. There just is this miracle, and it's you. You are this. There's nothing else than this miracle. In actuality, that's actually how it is. It actually is like that. And so, of course, you rule over everything because you do. Because what this is its own God. What this is doing itself magically, miraculously, in real time, with absolute authority. Mm-hmm. So this statement, supposedly by Jesus, is a really concise exposition of the yogi's experience in realization. There's one astounding fact that is the basis for all actual spirituality. In fact, it's the only fact that there is. And so it's the basis for everything whatsoever. This fact is the fact of your experience. And it happens to be an astounding fact. And it is that fact that makes it spiritually potent, is how astounding it is. Because the actual nature of this fact is, well, astounding is a good word for it. The entirety of the spiritual problem and the spiritual solution is this fact, which is your experience. That is the fact. If you misinterpret your experience, it's the cause of all suffering, all problems, all spiritual error, spiritual frustration, and so on. And if you correctly interpret this fact, you can leave the door open a bit. Put some air. If you correctly interpret this fact, which means don't interpret it at all because it's uninterpretable, and let it be as it is, then you can discover what this actually is, what you actually are. And it happens that this is doable because you already are this. So the one fact, the one actuality, the one reality, the one undeniable condition is the condition of your experience. Your experience is present. Okay? Now what that means, how you interpret that, how you parse that, is entirely arbitrary, essentially. But that it is actual, that it is real, is completely undeniable. And every single thing you think you know about yourself, about the world, about anything, is actually something you think you know about your experience. Because everything appears as experience. The only thing that appears is the field of your experience. So, simply giving some attention to the fact of experience as experience, rather than as what we're used to interpreting it as being, enables us to come to appreciate what this actually is, what we actually are. What?
You didn't start it properly because it's nothing.
It's nothing?
No.
Something broke.
Something broke.
Maybe if our engineers spent more of their time working instead of traveling through, your broadcast would have been successful. So I can try again. So, simply notice the fact that what you're experiencing is experience. You may be calling it a world, But that's just an interpretation of your experience. How do you know there's a world? Because you have experience, and you're interpreting the experience as consisting of a world. How do you know you have a body? Because there's experience, your experience, and you're interpreting the experience as consisting of a body. How do you know there are other beings? Because of your experience, and you're interpreting that experience as consisting of other beings. So the actuality that is present is simply your experience, and all the rest is just interpretation. Now, we can very easily jump to holding these interpretations to be accurate, holding them to be true, holding them to be an accurate reflection of what is the case. But in actuality, there's no basis for that. If you begin to notice your experience as experience rather than in the context, in the interpretive frameworks, in the worldviews that we're used to applying to it, that we're used to interpreting it as being, you begin to notice it has some very interesting and strange properties. For example, your experience is present. It is present. It is undeniably present. Nothing else whatsoever is present but your experience. You can't find anything, any presence whatsoever other than the presence of your experience. Your experience is instantaneous. It's always now. It's always here now. It's always this immediacy. It has no duration. It does not come and go. It is always exactly present now. You'll notice your experience presents a virtually infinite range of qualities, colors and lights and sounds and textures and thoughts and emotions and all this barrage of characteristics, of energy characteristics that show up in experience. My personal name for this fact is radiance. So this presence, this experiential field, is intrinsically radiant. It always shows up as something. Even when you're in deep sleep, it shows up as something. Even when you're in total anesthesia, it shows up as something. Maybe something very subtle, maybe something very relatively unstructured, but always as something. This radiance, these qualities that show up in your experience, tend to have degrees of patterning that they show up in. Of course, this is the basis for our interpreting of conditions and entities and things and objects and situations, is all of this astounding apparent patterning. But the interesting aspect of this patterning, or an interesting aspect of it, aside from the fact that it is apparent and obvious, is its absolute inconsistency. No pattern has any persistence whatsoever. No pattern ever repeats itself exactly twice. You never experience exactly the same configuration of experience twice. You never see the same thing twice. Even if there's a room that you go into every day of your life and you go in and out of that room every day of your life, every instant that you're experiencing that room, you will be having a different experience in actuality. You never think the same thought twice. You never feel the same emotion twice. Nothing whatsoever repeats itself. So these patterns, this apparent patterning is astoundingly instantaneous. And as soon as the patterning appears, it disappears. It morphs into something else. It may morph into something that is seemingly very similar to what it has previously appeared as, but very similar is a euphemism for entirely different. This patterning is absolutely unresolvable. So even though there's a very high degree of patterning in experience, when you try and get to the bottom of exactly what any pattern is, when you try and find anything, when you try and really find exactly what anything is, You can't. It's unresolvable. It's unfathomable. There's no definitive or final experience that you can have of any condition, of any object, of any apparent situation. So these are some of the obvious properties that experience has. And I invite you to look for yourself and see if that's not the case. Now, it happens that there is nothing but your experience. There is nothing but, let's call it your experiential field. There's nothing but this fact, this presence, this existence in actuality. So you are that. The world is that. Your life is that. Everyone and everything you know and ever have known is that. Everything you remember is that. So this suggests a profound reorientation towards what we are, where we are, how we are. And the fact that you are this means that this is accessible. It's available. It's not something you need to fantasize or aspire to or somehow come to understand. It's something that you already are. It's completely available and accessible. You are completely engaged with your experience. Experience is nothing other than engagement with itself, let's say. And you are that engagement. You can't turn it off. You can't get away from your experience. You can't make it go away. You can't shut it down. You can't turn it down. It doesn't have a volume control or, brightness level. So this complete, unstoppable, spontaneous engagement that is also profoundly intelligent. The experience's inherent ability to assimilate itself, to engage with itself, is inconceivably intelligent in terms of being able to be with itself in myriad ways, in terms of profundity of grasping patterns, profundity of finding meaningfulness, profundity of there's all sorts of dimensions of engagement. We dream dreams effortlessly. We think thoughts effortlessly. We engage with experiences and behaviors and interaction with other people and situations effortlessly. All of this just comes. You can't stop it. You can't not do it. Because it is doing itself. You are it, and it is doing itself. You can't find a you. You can't find consciousness. There's just this field of experience. You can't find a world that's being experienced. There's just this field of experience. We're used to analyzing it in those terms. We're used to saying, okay, there's, forms appearing to consciousness, but that's just a logical argument. You can't actually find a consciousness. Try and find consciousness. Try and put your hands on consciousness. Try and get a hold of consciousness. Consciousness is an arguable function of this presence, that it is manifestly conscious, but you can't actually find it, and that's just argued into existence. All you can say is there is this completely transcendental fact. When I say transcendental, I mean it transcends analysis, it transcends description, it transcends sorting out or making sense of, it transcends getting to the bottom of, it transcends finding definitively and conclusively, it's exactly this, now I've got it, now I know what it is. It's not like that. It's like trying to find a dream or something. It's obvious, it's manifest, it's immediate, but you can't resolve it. And experience is like that. Experience partakes of that quality, all these qualities. And you can't find what those qualities are definitively. I can put them out there, I can say they exist, but they don't actually. It's a lie. Because when you go and try and find the qualities, you can't pin them down, you can't isolate them, you can't find any of these aspects. They're jumping off points for investigation, and the investigation will spontaneously lead to a transcending of your starting point, because none of these conditions, none of these properties are actually isolatable, or actually findable, or actually have enough coherence that you can get to the bottom of it and say, yes, this is something, I've got it now. All of which enables the discovery of the inherently transcendental nature of this fact, of this actuality here. This is not theory or philosophy. This is an actual fact. This presence is, your experience is here. It's undeniable. It's not pie in the sky. And it's readily discoverable that it is very slippery, very strange intrinsically. And in discovering this slipperiness, this strangeness, you are embarking on the highest yoga. You are embarking on a discovery of the actuality of transcendence, the actuality that this is inconceivably more and other than it has ever been held to be, than it has ever been thought to be, than it's ever been described as being. Because it's indescribable. It's intrinsically indescribable. It's intrinsically infinite. So in terms of what the point of all this is, it is to point out that it is possible to be with your experience in fresh ways that may not be your normal ways of being with it. And these fresh ways of being with it can prove to be very transformative and very valuable, and radically, ultimately, reorient what your life feels like to you, what is going on here feels like to you, what you're doing with it feels like to you, every aspect of your life, which is sort of the overriding intent of spirituality, I guess. But at any rate, it happens to be that what's going on here is intrinsically much more amazing and astounding and beautiful and exciting and entertaining than any normal worldview can come up with. And discovering and accessing this fact, taking advantage of this fact, is possible and wonderfully advantageous. So that's basically what we're looking at. And then ways of doing this and techniques and tricks are as many as you can find. In the sheet that I handed out this morning, I listed a bunch of imputed characteristics of radiant presence, and the value of each of these points is that they can be valuable jumping off points for looking at your experience, the actuality of your experience freshly. Looking at it in terms of its instantaneity, the fact that only the present moment exists. Really being with that fact and exploring that fact for yourself, and feeling the intrinsic implications of that irrationally and just very directly, without thinking about it or making sense of it, can be wonderfully provocative and transformative. The fact that it's infinitely differentiated, the way that experience is infinitely different than itself in terms of its presentation. Any portion of your experience you look at is different than every other portion of your experience in that instant, and different than itself even in virtually the same instant, which is mind-boggling. But again, looking at your experience in terms of this property as a jumping off point can be very interesting. The dynamism, there's a whole school of Kashmir Shaivism which is basically focused on taking advantage of the intrinsic dynamism of reality as a spiritual path. They call it spanda, which etymologically is a word which relates to our word expand, expansion. So it it points out that reality is intrinsically creative, intrinsically positive, intrinsically expressive, and of course this actuality of your experience is that. It is this expression, this spontaneous presence. Experience comes to you. Experience, the experiential characteristics jump forth into your experience dynamically. You don't need to go to them. You don't need to make them come to you. You don't need to invite them. You don't need to build a bridge. On the contrary, you can't avoid it. It's like a spotlight constantly shining in your face. And noticing this intrinsic dynamism, this intrinsic creativity of reality in its primal nature is very profound and transcendental aspect of reality. And all of these principles, as they actually are, which of course transcend the way they're being put here, are directly accessible. They're directly available because they are here. They are this. And so simply tuning into that can enable you to be with your experience on a more primal basis than you're used to doing, and outside of your modes of normalcy, which is always intrinsically transformative and transformative. The infinite patterning, the amazing structural presentation of experience, the way there's just all of these functional structures and systems and bodies and clouds and planets and weather systems and geopolitical systems and atoms, and just everywhere you look on any scale of looking, you see this incredible functional structurality that partakes of all these other properties, that is intrinsically entirely dynamic, that is infinitely differentiated, that is instantaneous. All these other qualities are integrally present. And of course this quality we're all very used to that, because this is how we're used to relating to our environment in terms of the objects and the apparent pattern circumstances that seem to be present. But this patterning is more interesting than it's usually held to be from a materialistic point of view, because it's fractal. In other words, the patterning exists on infinite levels within the same structure. Like, for example, you look at your body, you can look at the cells, you can look at the atoms the cells are made out of, and they each autonomously on their own level have their own kind of a structurality which is sufficient on that level, and yet all of these different scales of observation. This is just looking at it in terms of sort of spatial size and all that, but the same phenomena can be found on any level of being with experience. Any way you look at experience, you will find this amazing functional structurality and interrelationship. Our thought is an example of that, in a very different way. Thought is profoundly interrelated and profoundly structural, and also very fractal in its nature. And so noticing this amazing patterning again reveals an intrinsic aspect of what this actually is. And that it is unresolvable and incoherent is also very powerful, because the fact that you cannot actually pin down exactly what anything is. Everything is exactly what it is. Anything is exactly what it is, but you can't get to the bottom of what that is, which is a very strange condition. And yet is, of course, easily observable. So this basically, paradoxically, completely undermines the principle of patterning. Even though everything is intensely functionally patterned, it's basically unpatterned. It's a little bit like a TV screen where it looks like there's all of these people and environments and events taking place, but you look closer, there's just these little flashing dots of light that are in no way actually integrated with each other. Although that's sort of a sloppy analogy. I'll try and come up with a better one sometime. But even though it was dreamlike, even though things present themselves with such intense patterning, exactly what any pattern is is always going to be a question mark. It's always going to be unresolved. It's going to be unfinished business. No matter how well you know someone, you don't know who they are. There's always, when you know them, you know them better, you live with them the rest of your life, and you know them infinitely well, and you still don't know who they are. And the same applies to, simple sensory experience. You look at a color and you know what the color is, but you don't know exactly what it is. What is this color? And this aspect of experience is, again, very powerful and intrinsic to what this is. And the last one that I listed, in this case, it never departs from itself. This experience is always just experience. With all of this incredible variety, incredible differentiation, incredible dynamism, it's always just experience. It never changes. It never leaves from that. It never departs from that. It never becomes more. It never becomes less. Your experience is not more now than it was when you were 2. It's just your experience at this moment is in a profound sense a constant. Nothing is gained. Nothing is lost. Nothing is added to it. Nothing is taken away from it. No matter what happens, nothing is gained and nothing is lost. It is what it is with absolute, let's say, inalienability, absolute constancy. So all of these principles can be jumping off points. If you find yourself stymied with, okay, radiant presence, great, so what do I do now? You can play with some of these notions. Look into your experience along some of these parameters and anything else that occurs to you, and notice how amazing it is. Beauty is a wonderful thing for noticing radiant presence. Look at a beautiful sunset or something that just moves you, and you look at it and you go, wow. Anything with a wow factor to it. What is it? What is it about that has? Why is there a wow there? What is it there that's a wow? And that is a sure symptom of a direct perception of the transcendental nature of all this. The idea, the fact that what this is intrinsically is more than we're used to thinking of it as being, in a sense of absolute richness, meaningfulness, juiciness, profundity, etc., etc. This right here is the presence of reality itself. This is not some small reflection of some reality somewhere else. This is it. Your being is the being of reality. Your being is divine presence. Your being is the being of the Absolute. We have all these fantastic notions in spirituality, divinity, and transcendence, and the Absolute, and all of this. What they all refer to is this actuality right here, this actual presence of your experience. Your experience is present, right? It is here. What is that? How is it present? It's inconceivable. It's miraculous. Of course, we take it for granted because it's always here, right? Present, sure, my spirit is present. But what is it? How does it work? How can there be this presence? Where does it come from? What's doing it? You can't make it go away. You can't stop it. You can't turn it off. We think of it as, it's just present. Of course, I'm here. The present moment is here. It's just completely obvious. It's normal. And we may have a tendency to minimize it, to just assume it's just part of the window dressing, part of the background. How can this be? How can this be present? How can experience be present? How can consciousness be present? It's inconceivable. There's no way you can wrap your head around it. There's no way you can say when it works or think what it is. Of course, we're used to thinking that. We're used to thinking, I'm a human being and I'm, I live in a body and I'm kind of a byproduct of biochemistry in the brain, and I live in a vast world that's other than me. But there's no way you can actually get a handle on what this is. All of these stories we tell ourselves are just vast oversimplifications of an inconceivable actuality. That it's actual is undeniable. What it is, how it works, is mind-blowing. You look at it, you try to sort it out, you try and make sense of it, you try and fit it into normal descriptions, normal philosophies, materialism, what have you. They're myths, they're absurd simplifications that do not apply to this inconceivability. What is it that is here? What is it that is present? It's clearly present. It's obviously something here, something going on, something actual, some actuality. What is it? It's what you call your experience, isn't it? Your experience is here, right? And we have lots of labels for our experience. Our experience. We have experience of your body, experience of other people's bodies outside of you, seemingly, experience of the room you're in, experience of the world, experience of all these things, experience of your sense fields, experience of your field of vision, experience of your field of hearing, experience of your field of thought, experience of various subtle energies, what have you, that we don't have classifications for, but of course these are part of our experience. What is this experience? What is this experience? And all of these names we have for things that we suppose are actualities are just names of experience. Think of a dream. In a dream, say you're walking down the street and on the sidewalk and someone comes up to you and you talk to them, the car drives by, whatever, right? Just a dream. There's no sidewalk there. There's no car there. There's no other person you're talking to. Your body isn't even there. The only thing that's there is a dream. Right? And we have the same situation here. What's here is the field of your experience. Right? I mean, is this not true? Is this not obvious? And anything you think you know about is a description of aspects of that. Right? So, under our feet is the floor, right? How do you know there's a floor there? Because you experience. You think, I'm experiencing the floor, but you don't know you're experiencing the floor. You're just experiencing, and you're calling it a floor. In a dream, you might experience standing on the floor, and you know perfectly well when you wake up there was no floor there. There seemed to be a floor, but all there was experience. Experience is so close, where we are inhabiting this bubble of experience, right? Your experience is like a bubble. The entire world appears in it. Everyone you see in this room is appearing in your experience. You can't tell if they're actually there or not. Your body is appearing in your experience. You feel it, you hear it, you see it, but All of that is just experience. What is this? What is this experience? Oh, it's a phenomenon of consciousness. Okay, great. What's consciousness? Again, the only reason we can claim there's something like consciousness, claim there's something like a world, claim there's something like bodies, claim there's something like other people, is because this presence that we call experience is here. And it looks as if it was kind of like that. We can explain it in those terms and it kind of holds up until we go to sleep and it all disappears, but then we just pretend, oh, I just went to sleep. The waking condition is the real condition. Sleep, when everything disappears, isn't real. Right? Maybe sleep is real condition when everything disappears, and when you wake up, it's like a dream where everything appears. Who knows? Ramana Maharshi said, ask who am I, find out who you are. Nisargadatta said, you're not what you take yourself to be. So, what are you? Well, there's this present field of experience. What if you're that? What if you're this bubble of experience? What's that like? Maybe the world seems to exist because you do, because your bubble of experience is present, so the world can seem to appear. Just like in a dream, right? Where was the world before you were born? Where's the world when you go to sleep? Where's the world after you die? This is. This is. It's a very powerful fact. This is. It's the powerful fact. Can't say what it is, can't say how it is, even though everyone does. It's all bravado. But that this is absolutely undeniable. It's reality, it's truth. This is. And you are that. It's present. It's that is. It's intuitively obvious, of course. I'm this. I'm here. As soon as I start qualifying it and trying to say what it is and trying to spin stories and analyses about it, I'm bullshitting. And I know I'm bullshitting. When you were a little kid, say you were 6 months old, you didn't know what anything was. You knew you didn't know what anything was. And you start learning a lot of vocabulary, start learning a lot of names, oh, that's a car, that's a tree, that's a person, I'm mommy, I'm daddy, this, that. And so we learn all of these names as if we're learning something, when all we're learning is names of something we don't know what it is, right? You don't know what mommy is. I mean, you know the presence of mommy, right? You know the flavor of mommy, but what is that? It's transcendental. You can't pin it down. You can't draw a circle around it. You can't describe it. You can't define it definitively.
So all of this whole dictionary full of 10,000 words, it's all bravado. It's all just labels of the unknown. And we forget we have so many labels for things, so we can say, oh, that's a statue, that's a tonka, this is a cushion, this is a floor, this is a chair, you're a person, this is a computer. So all these labels, and we can pretend we know what that is. What's a computer? Oh, it's a circuit. Okay, great. What's a circuit? It's a complex arrangement of elements so electricity can work and do certain things. Okay, great. What's electricity? What's matter? What are elements? You get to a point where you just have to admit you're bullshitting. Even if you have a degree in physics, then you have a really sophisticated mathematical arsenal of language and terminology, and you can start quoting all these Latin terms and all that. But still, you get to a point where you get to, if you got every Nobel Prize-winning physicist that ever lived in this room, and asked them, what is energy? If they were honest, they would say, we don't know. We can tell you a lot about it. We can tell you a lot about what it looks like when you measure it, when you do certain things in certain controlled circumstances with it. But what is it? It's transcendental, but it's here. This is energy. Right now, your field of vision is full of light. It's full of light. This is energy. What is this? No one knows what it is. No physicist can tell you what light is. They can tell you a lot about it, but they can't tell you what it is. And yet here it is. You have it. You are it. It is in you. You have intimate experience of it. You close your eyes and your field of vision is still full of light. You go to sleep, field of vision is still full of light. Start dreaming, field of vision is still full of light. Never-ending presence of this transcendental energy. Completely accessible, you're completely engaged with it. It's in you, it's in your experience, right? You can know light by being it, by experiencing it, and you do. You can't say what it is, but it's the nature of it. You can't say what things are. We can't think. This is unthinkable. Literally unthinkable, not in some sense of hyperbole, but thoughts cannot comprehensively grasp or define what anything is. Thoughts can label things, you can name things, you can point to things, you can say, yeah, this is light, this is sound, this is consciousness, this is presence, this is gravity. You can sort of wave your hand and have these labels that indicate them like a URL on the web, that takes you to a website. But what it is, it can't be said. You can't pin it down. No one has ever pinned it down. And yet, you have it. You have light. You have gravity. You have consciousness. All of these actualities are you. You are immediately engaged with them most profoundly. So we can know these things, but we can't know them conceptually. We can't know them definitively. And so if you let go of the arrogance, the human arrogance of defining things, of labeling things, of pretending you know what things are by being able to bullshit really well, and embrace the actuality of your experience, you know what these things are in a way that is totally unsayable, totally unthinkable, and yet it's beable. You are light. You are consciousness. You are sound. This is all self-evident. You are experience. Right? If you're anything, you're this, right? Can you find a you other than the bubble of your experience, the field of your experience? Simply feeling this presence, which you always feel, right? You can't not feel it. You can't turn it off. You can't shut it down. Simply feeling this presence is profoundly powerful. You are feeling the presence of reality, the actual presence of reality. You are feeling the presence of transcendence. It's transcendent in the sense that you can't pin it down. You can't say what it is. It's entirely mysterious, entirely magical. How can now be? How can space be? How can consciousness be? All these things. How can you dream? How can you go to sleep and you, with your little mind, spin out these, I don't know, some people think dreams are vague, but if you ever go lucid in a dream, it can be just as real as this, just as detailed. How does that happen? And you just spin it out in real time, just improvise it, just like bang. You don't sit and plan for hours building up scene by scene what a dream's going to be and putting all the little bits there or something, right? You just improvise it. You're just jamming. Your consciousness is just throws all this shit out. How can that happen? How can this happen? In this nothing in this instance ever happened before. Everything you're seeing right now, you have never seen before, and you will never see again, right? And that's always true. Everything you're hearing, likewise, the same thing. The experience is always unique, and it's instantaneous. It's gone. It's not here for any time at all. It's the present. How long does the present moment last? It doesn't last like a little while or an instant, or it doesn't last at all. It's not even here. As soon as it's here, it's already gone. It's already moved on to become another set of circumstances, another presentation. How does that happen? It's trippy, it's weird, it's mind-boggling. And yet it's right here, it's totally obvious. You can look at it anytime you want, right? It's real, it's actual. So this actual presence is the presence of transcendental reality. And you can look at it, you can study it anytime you want. And you will see what it is. You won't be able to say what it is, you won't be able to pin it down. But it's not something that can be pinned down, so that's cool. How do you pin down infinity? How do you pin down the divine? And just feeling this presence without imposing your concepts of what it is. Just feeling it, just be open, just feel it, Don't know what it is, just feel it. Let go of your worldview for a minute, let go of your sense of anything. Just let go of pretending you know what anything is, and just feel this presence. It won't go away. When you don't know what it is, it's still right here, exactly the same. And then you can feel what it really is, and it will show you what it is. And just this feeling, this presence is profoundly powerful. It's easy to think of it as, oh no, I feel a presence all the time. It doesn't do anything, It's doing all this. It's taking you from birth to here.
So the most powerful spiritual engagement, the most powerful spiritual practice, so to speak, is direct engagement with actuality. And it's very easy because, of course, You're always directly engaged with actuality. You always have been and you always will be. There's nothing else to be engaged with. Unactuality cannot appear. Anything that appears is actual, of course. But it's not what you think it is. And there's the rub, is that, here again we come up against this interesting dichotomy between the myth of interpretability and the fact of uninterpretability, the fact of indeterminacy, the fact of indefinability. So you already are fully engaged with actuality. You always have been. You always will be. You are this engagement. This engagement is not something to do. It's what you are. It's what this is. This is an engagement with itself. This is inconceivability looking at itself. What is seeing is inconceivable. What is being seen is inconceivable. That it is being seen is inconceivable. Every aspect of it is, off the charts. Is just absolutely beyond the pale. It's intrinsically transcendental by its very nature. And this is already, of course, fully the case. This has already happened. This is already what this is. This is already what you are. And the only thing that keeps one from recognizing this fact is thinking that it's other than that, which of course is very easy to do, because there is this powerful creative intelligence, this powerful interpretive ability, this powerful semantic functionality that we humans have to model things, to create images, to create versions, to create philosophies, interpretations. And it can be very challenging to get that this very interpretive mode is intrinsically incomplete. Reality cannot be captured by concepts. And so as long as we are relying on conceptual modes to approach it, we will be basically shadowboxing. We will be playing with our own concepts, and even though it's in the context of reality, and even though paradoxically it actually consists of reality, it may not be recognized, because the playing with concepts becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You tend to see what you're defining, because again, the very strange nature of this actuality is that it can be seen in so many different ways, and it seems to be that. It verifiably seems to be that. You can look at it as being, in a certain context, as being a certain way, and you can find evidence for that. And we have all the different points of view of human investigation, human inquiry to look at, to see this fact. Of course, all spirituality, but science, materialist science, all these things, psychology, all these things are, pushing their own envelopes of their own definitions and evolving within that context. But none of them have captured this. None of them have completely got it. They're all rough approximations, and they continually refine themselves to create more rough approximations, which continually refine themselves and evolve to create more rough approximations forever and ever and ever. And they ain't ever going to get there, because it can't be done. Not for want of trying, not for want of wit and intelligence and creativity, for want of an actual findable condition. This condition is findable, but it is not, again, it is intrinsically not definable. So it's not findable as anything. It's rather like when you find indeterminacy, what have you found? You've found that you can't find anything. And yet that is findable. It's findable that you can't find anything. That's an actual result, but it may not feel like a result if you're expecting a an that looks like something. Which, of course we often are. So, that being the case, what to do? Unfortunately, generally well-intentionedly, but naively, most spirituality seems to consist of trying to improve one's definitions, trying to improve and refine one's model, one's conceptual understanding, not necessarily conceptual. And typically, this occurs unconsciously, so we aren't aware that that's the case. We think we genuinely and altruistically think we are working with something that is going to be productive. But the only way that working with concepts can be productive is to discover that you have to let them go, you have to transcend them, that mode is doomed to failure in terms of getting anywhere in its own terms. So, what I recommend, I've arbitrarily named the yoga radiant presence, and I'll go into what that consists of. I call it a yoga because yoga is a technical term for a practical engagement of inquiry that can yield a genuine discovery of reality, can yield realization, can yield what is called enlightenment. And which is nothing other than recognizing this actual condition as it is. And paradoxically, again, realization is not the achievement of anything, because all you're doing is recognizing what has always been the case, recognizing what you always have been. So it's a complete non-achievement, and yet experientially in feeling tone it changes everything, because you're no longer holding yourself to be what you aren't. And it's not that you're not that. It's not that our conceptualizations are entirely wrong, but they're partial, and their partiality is extreme. They're not mostly right and missing a little bit around the edges. It's not like that. No matter how elaborate and precise your conceptualizations are, a miss is as good as a mile. They don't contain this. They don't get to this. They don't address this as it is. And so they are not liberating. Liberation, realization cannot be found through concepts, cannot be found through modeling, cannot be found through semantics. And again, paradoxically, it already is the case. It is, what this actuality is intrinsically transcendental. It happens to be that that's the case. I mean, it's wonderful news that that's the case. If this actuality was actually the sort of limited materialistic hell that the man on the street may think it is, I mean, wouldn't that be a shame? We'd all be screwed. But it happens that that's not the case, and this fact is discoverable through noticing, through recognizing what this actual condition is. And again, this is a lot easier than one might think, because you already are fully engaged with it. You already are fully noticing it. You've never actually experienced anything other than reality as it is. So the mechanism of confusion, the mechanism of delusion, the mechanism of misinterpretation is very paradoxical and subtle and weird, because it consists of actuality itself. It's being done by actuality itself, and yet the effect seems to be to make the forest vanish for the trees, which of course hasn't gone anywhere, right? The trees are the forest. And yet it can quite successfully seem to not recognize itself. But again, this recognition is possible, because what is trying to be recognized is actually here, is actually available, is actually the case, and you already are actually fully engaged with it and nothing else whatsoever. So, again, and you can't sort that out, you can't make sense of it. But again, that's not an issue, because you can't sort out and make sense of anything. Because again, this is an intrinsically transcendental condition, which means that no matter how articulately you deconstruct aspects of the way it works, you've missed the mark entirely. And it's essentially so much something else than that is to be laughable. So we can talk about all these aspects of recognition and delusion and confusion and all that, but it's all basically hot air because it's not actually like that. And yet, it can be useful to look at it in these terms, in terms of a jumping off point into recognition, into being with this actuality. So, a good keyword for effective spiritual practice, effective spiritual engagement could be recognition. It's not about achieving anything, it's not about doing anything, it's not about manufacturing some superior capability of quieting the mind or developing meditation or ramping up your prana or what have you. It's simply recognizing what this is. So how to do that? How to do that in the context of our profound addiction to semantic systems. And again, it's a challenge because this is largely unconscious. We don't know that our semantic systems are semantic systems and are inaccurate. We think they're objectively true. We think the world exists. If someone comes up to you and says the world doesn't exist, the immediate feeling is, oh, this person's a wacko, But that the world exists and that feels like an obvious fact is an unconscious definition, an unconscious determination. That you exist, that you are your body, that there is space, that there is time. All these kinds of even most fundamental notions that people in general completely take for granted as just obviously, objectively true, are actually unconscious, typically unconsciously held definitions, ideas, essentially concepts, and they are not true. Not that they're not a little bit true as far as they go, but they are comprehensively true. And again, the truth is, the actuality is beyond them sufficiently that it completely transcends what these notions seem to present. So I call this the yoga of radiant presence. Yoga, of course, is an ancient technical term that means an actual spiritual practice of engagement in inquiry or discovery that can, I guess at least theoretically, lead to discovery, lead to realization, lead to the discovery of reality, and correspondingly the freedom from delusion, freedom from addictive misinterpretation, we might call it. So that covers the word yoga. Now, radiant presence. Radiant presence is one way, of course, an inaccurate way, because any way of putting it would be inaccurate. But it's an inaccurate way, but an evocative way of referring to what this is that is here. What is this? What is it that's present? What is experience made of? What is this actuality? I mean, that it's actual is a given. It's the only given, really. This is whatever that is. Whatever is means and this means, this is, right? This is completely intuitively obvious. So what is this? How is this? What substance is present? Something is present, let's say, for there to seem to be something present. So what is it that's present? There is presence. Presence is a word referring to this transcendental quality of isness, here-ness, nowness. Right? You might just call it being. You might call it actuality. You might call it reality. Right? What is actual and what is real, and what is here is another question. But that it is actual in whatever way it is actual. Maybe the actuality is actually non-actual in some sense, but that's okay. That's still what we got. That's still the actuality, right? So this is present. And again, we can be loose with what exactly we mean by that. But it's kind of a good starting point. So this is real. This is actual. This is here. And what is it that's here? Well, I call it experiential characteristics, qualities of experience. Light, color, shape, sound, thought, subtle energy experience, anything whatsoever that can be experienced, that is experienced, is some degree of qualitativeness presenting itself. And exactly what that is and how it works and what it means, we can be a little loose with that. So there is this actuality, and this actuality always presents itself as qualities. There's no such thing as presence without qualities. The qualities may be surpassingly subtle, as to be essentially nothingness. But even if there was a nothingness that was present, the nothingness would be a subtle quality. So anyway, is there anything missing from that? If we take radiant presence in a loose sense as a formula for what this is that comprehensive? Is there anything missing? Is there anything else that somehow is not present or is not radiance? And I think, at least as a jumping off point, that's pretty comprehensive. That can be said to be what this is. So this is radiant presence. Now, one of the really nice things about this actuality is it's already doing itself. You don't need to do it. You can't stop it, in fact. You can't turn it up. You can't make it more. You can't make it less. You can't speed it up. You can't slow it down. You may have a broad range of seeming navigation within what it looks like. I mean, you can go to sleep, you can meditate, you can shoot yourself, you can dream, you can look at that, you can look at that, you can close your eyes, whatever. And so all of these various sort of apparitional states can seem to appear within this, but it's still always presence, and it's still always radiance. It's still always some degree of experiential qualities and characteristics showing up. So it's already doing itself. It already is that. It always has been that. It always will be that. So the fact that it's doing itself is kind of nice. The fact that it's already engaged with itself is kind of nice. It is what is being seen. Let's say what is being experienced is this actuality, and what is seeing it, to the extent that's meaningful, is this actuality, and it's already happening. It's already being done. Reality is already being seen. Reality is already seeing itself as your experience. So that's kind of that's kind of a nice fact. So the trick of this yoga is to let that fact be the practice. Let reality itself be the vehicle to reality. Let the mechanism, the ongoing eventfulness of reality be sufficient. And of course it is sufficient. It's already everything. Anything whatsoever that could show up, that could appear, that could be experienced is exactly that. Is exactly this actuality. Doing what it does within its vast, inconceivable range of possible apparition, let's say. So this is already here. It's already fact. It's already a fait accompli. And recognition is simply recognition of that fact. Which again, you are already actually recognizing, whether you recognize that you're recognizing it or not. However that works, right? So this actuality is available. It's right here. The laboratory is right here. The subject of inquiry, the subject of investigation is right here. You can look at this, you can study it in great precision, in great engagement. You can look at what your experience is made of. What is it that you're seeing? What is light? What is color? What is thought? What is sensation? What is sound? There are other experiential characteristics that we can't qualify within those sets, within those groupings, maybe subtle energy, God knows what. Whatever is experienceable on any subtle or transcendental or any level is available. If you're experiencing it, then that means it's available for study. It's available for investigation. So, and the fact that you're experiencing it means you're already engaged with it. You're already there. If you're experiencing it, you are there. You are with it. You don't need to go to it. It's already right here. And so, basically, the yoga of radiant presence consists of, in practice, letting yourself be seduced by your experience. And it will show you what it is. It will directly reveal the fact that it is what I call transcendental, that it is indeterminate, that even though it presents with an inconceivable degree of specificity, right? Everything you experience is precisely exactly the way it is in the instant, right? Everything you see is incredible detail, right? I mean, just what you're seeing now, right? Looking around, you see all these people and colors and hair and shapes. I mean, it's very precise. It's very exactly what it is. And yet it's all fuzzy, too. It's all indeterminate. You can't say exactly what any of it is, exactly what color is a particular color, exactly what, what precisely is anything. And it's not, again, in human logic we tend to go towards either or. It's either this or that, and they sort of tend to cancel each other out. But it's not like that, is it? All of this specificity and the indeterminacy of experience coexist. They are one. They are the same. Physicists encountered this problem when quantum mechanics was beginning to be investigated, and they were confused as hell by it. Because, the closer they looked at the behavior of subatomic particles, the weirder it was. Because they could extract specific measurements, but simultaneously they discovered that intrinsically what they were looking at seemed to exist as probability fields or something, which is dizzying, because it's not this or that. It's an indeterminacy. And of course this is on the scale of subatomic physics, but we all experience this in our experience on every scale. Every time you see something, you see it very sharply to the extent you do, but it's also fuzzy, right? Every time you hear something, you hear it with precision to the degree that you do, but it's also, has fuzzy, it has loose edges. You can't really say exactly what it is. There's always harmonics and subtleties and nuances to it which are uncharacterizable. So experience itself conveys its own nature. Not surprisingly. In other words, it's not hidden. What it is plain to see. The only thing that hides it is our unconscious, typically, assumption that we already know what it is, so we don't look. And it's relatively easy to let yourself be with experience. Arguably, I'm claiming. It's relatively easy to be with experience and notice that it is more than you can describe. It's more than you can capture in your mind. And again, not in general terms, not in vague terms or philosophical terms, but experientially, very precisely, in the immediate moment of engagement with experience, anything you're seeing, anything you're hearing, anything you're feeling, any experience that's showing up in any other range of experience anywhere, if you see what's there, you'll see that you cannot describe it. You can maybe say a lot about it, you can describe it perhaps at great length, but there will always be aspects that you cannot capture in description. And this is, of course, self-evident. We all know this. Look at a newspaper headline. Well, that's true. And that's just a very gross example of all definition, all conceptualization. What's happening here? Well, so you say, it's a talk, it's a spiritual talk. Okay, that really captures it. That really pins down the behavior of every quark in this continuum. That really captures all the nuance that are showing up within the experiential field, and subtleties and dimensions and transformations and dynamisms and meaningfulnesses and inspirations, and There's a talk. And there is a talk. It's not that it's not a talk. It's that a talk is an arbitrary label for an inconceivable, ungraspable infinity. All labels are arbitrary labels for inconceivable, ungraspable infinity. Because that's what we got. That's what there is here. It's inconceivable, ungraspable infinity by its very nature. It intrinsically is that. And, the wonderful, I'm arguing, I'm stating that the wonderful fact is this is clearly apparent, this is discoverable, simply through being with experience very directly. Outside, even slightly outside, but to some degree outside of the context of defining it, of holding it to be something, of saying, oh, this is this, that is that, this is a chair. Sure, it's a chair, but the chair is a label that's being put on what? It's being put on an inconceivable presence. Yeah, this is presence. What is it that's present? An astounding range of qualities. And the qualities themselves, they're experiential qualities. They aren't objective as far as can be found. And experiential qualities by their very nature are intrinsically dynamic. Nothing sits still in experience. And you can try this experiment if you haven't. Sit for 5 minutes and still and look at a blank wall. And after a while you'll realize you're looking at a light show. It's just, you try and find a wall that's just sitting there inertly. Experientially, it can't be done unless you imagine it. And of course we're all very expert at this. You move your head and the entire world shifts. You get close to something and things get big, But conceptually we say, no, this is just perspective. Everything's staying the same size. Right? But that's software. That's argument. In actuality, everything, when you get close to something, it gets bigger. Self-evident, right? This is an actuality. This is experiential fact. But we gloss over it with a conceptual add-on of, no, everything stays the same. There's an objective world that is stable, and I'm moving through it. So all of a sudden we create this idea of motion, this idea of stable physical systems, and so on and so forth. And it's not that that's not true. It's just that experience conveys more than that, conveys other than that. And the question here isn't what are these models like, playing one model off against the other. The question is, what is experience? Because experience is actuality. Experience is the only actuality. And again, this is a very powerful fact. Experience is actuality. So if you want to know what actuality is, look at experience. And of course, you'll be looking at experience most powerfully if you look at it on its own terms, rather than with a lot of a priori philosophy, expectations, and assumptions, which we typically do, albeit unconsciously. We're not malicious. We're not trying to screw ourselves up, but effectively, in terms of recognizing experience as it is, we do so through these sort of unconscious holding models, holding interpretations, and assuming, again unconsciously, that they're objectively true. So that's a kind of an overview of what I call the yoga of radiant presence. Trademark. Or not. It's an arbitrary name, and of course the name and the entire discussion, everything I've referred to, is actually not true. Because the actual situation transcends any of that. And yet, this can be a practical jumping off point to discover that fact. Any spiritual practice is effective when it transcends itself, when it disproves itself, when it reveals that it is more than it pretends to be, more than it seems to be. Any philosophy is successful when it destroys itself by showing that reality transcends it. Reality, not surprisingly, turns out to be what all this fuss and spirituality is about. God is right here. This is real. This is actual. This reality is the reality. This reality is not some lesser spin-off of some little spark of some great reality out there with, I don't know what. This is it. This is real. This real is the real. You feel it. You've never felt anything else. How could you? What else is there to feel? If you feel it, it's real. If it's not real, you can't feel it. Reality is a synonym for actuality. What is actual? What is present? What is here? What is? Simply. And what is reality? These sound like really highfalutin abstractions, but it's simply just this actuality, that is right here, right? And this is what all the fuss in spirituality is about. Just this actual presence. Of course, the fly in the ointment is that this presence, this actuality, is very easy to misinterpret. And if we misinterpret it, we can tie ourselves into a whole imaginary ball of knots, which can be very frustrating and painful and confusing. And we're constantly being seduced and encouraged to do so by all the people that are throwing their misinterpretations around and as if they were important and relevant, very seductively. And of course everyone's doing it, so we must be wrong if we're not doing it. So of course we readily tend to chime in with the interpretations of our parents and our teachers and our society and our peers and everyone that's around us. So there's all of these interpretations of what's going on here, what this is. And they're all wrong. Every single one of them is wrong. Not because we're stupid, not because we're not clever, not because we're not artful, but because what this actually is happens to be completely uninterpretable by its nature. It is not something that collapses down to coherence. And all interpretations depend upon or claim to collapse things down into coherence. If you can't say what something is, then there's no point talking about it. And so all interpretation is predicated upon the assumption that you can say what something is. You can talk about things and what you're talking about actually exists more or less in the way you're talking about it. This happens to not actually be the case. So, any interpretation is wrong, it is false. And basically all human discourse consists of interpretation. In short, anything you can say is wrong, anything you can say is inaccurate, anything you can think as a concept is inaccurate, is intrinsically wrong. Again, not because we're idiots, but because what we're trying to capture by these descriptions, by these definitions, is not amenable to being captured by its very nature. It is infinite. It is open-ended. It is divergent. If reality was convergent, if you looked at something, the more you looked at it, the more it would tend to converge into a wholeness, into a simplicity, and then you could finally get to the bottom of it and find what it is. But if you look at your experience, it's not like that, is it? Everything diverges. The closer you look at something, the more you find out. And you look at that more closer, and you find out more about that. And you look at any portion of that closer, and you find out more. So investigation tends to diverge. It tends to increase in quality and quantity. It tends to go very far afield from what your starting point was. And all of that, likewise, if you look into any of these things farther down the road of your inquiry, that diverges. So we're in the very funny position of looking at anything and not being able to find it, not being able to tell what it is, because of this inherent, divergent, infinite nature of this experiential actuality. The Buddhists have a very nice word for this. They call it emptiness. And they kind of nicely illustrates this conundrum, although they tie it up with a lot of philosophical complexities, which makes it almost impenetrable. But it's simply based upon the simple fact that you can't get to the bottom of anything in experience. And I think this is pretty self-evident. Try and find out exactly what anything is. I mean, exactly. The more vague you are, the more general you are, the more authoritative you can be. Well, this is a microphone, and it looks kind of like that, and it's kind of black. Okay. Well, that's complete. How many different ways can that be experienced? Is there a finite list? This is an experience, right? It's not a microphone, it's an experience, right? I can't find a microphone outside of my experience, and when I look at the microphone, I'm actually looking at experience. So, is there any end to call it the set of experiences that I can have in relationship to this called experiential object? There's no end. There's just no end. There's no final experience of this microphone. So what is it? Is it this, or is it this, or is it this, or is it this? What's it really look like? Well, it looks like all of that. It's all that and so much more. And everything experientially. Can everyone hear me okay? Mm-hmm. Everything experientially is like that, and experience is what we got, Basically, when you look at anything, when you look for anything, where are you looking? You're looking in your experience. You're looking at your experience. You may be thinking of yourself as looking at characteristics in your experience. I can identify this microphone and tell it apart from the floor behind it visually, because it presents itself with certain characteristics, certain sheens, certain color, range of colors, so on and so forth. And the carpet behind it presents a certain alternative range of textures and colors and so on, right? So there's a set of characteristics, just called experiential characteristics that are being presented. So this microphone is, for me, a set of experiential characteristics. How big a set? How many colors is this microphone? I can say, well, it's just black. It's a black microphone. Okay, how many shades of black are there? Can I make a finite list? Can I say, well, this point is a very, very slightly different shade than that point, and this point's a little bit different, and that point's a little bit. How many points are there in my field of vision? Well, as many as I care to specify, and they're all a slightly different shade of black. So what color is this thing? I can't even find that. It's too much information. And this is our conundrum. Our experiential field is information rich beyond the wildest imagination, beyond the wildest speculation, beyond count, beyond quantification. In every category. Right? So, here we have this experiential field. It's actual. Experiential field is actual. It's right here. Undeniably, if anything is actual, your experiential field is actual, right? If it's not actual, then try and find an alternative that is. And where would you look for it? So this actuality presents itself as infinity, as too much information, essentially. Too much information to codify, too much information to quantify, too much information to pull into a coherence. How many colors am I seeing right now? I can't answer that question. I cannot answer that question. Because everywhere I look, there's a different shade of color. Even if I look at so-called something that is so-called a particular color, every portion of it is a slightly different shade. And if I look closer, I can find sub-portions of each of those, and they're all slightly different colors, slightly different shades. Right? So here is this vastness. It's right here. This vastness is right here. And what can I say about it? Unless I speak in generalizations, unless I speak in gross oversimplifications, averages, I cannot be accurate. I cannot say what it is. And yet, as human beings, in terms of our narration, in terms of our discourse, we pretend we can. Oh, you're wearing a brown jacket. How nice, you know. I like the shade. Which shade? Which particular shade? Oh, it's nice brown. You know, we do this and we don't notice what we're actually doing. We're shutting the door on the richness of actuality and only acknowledging a minuscule, paltry skimming of the top of oversimplifications of this presence, of what's actually present, this lusciousness that is present. Which is fine. I mean, who cares, right? What difference does it make? Well, it doesn't make any difference. Except, arguably, that this way of being with this tends to indoctrinate us away from noticing what it actually is. And we tend to go into a narrative description of what it is. Oh, I went to a meeting tonight. It was a spiritual talk. It was in Scotts Valley, and, you know, kind of a nice little room, sort of yellowish walls, and there were a few people there. It's kind of interesting. Does that encapsulate what's happening here? You know, does that capture the detail, the experiential detail of what's present, and even an instant of what's happening here? It's an absurdity. And yet, this is the way we are encouraged by our society and our media and our semantic conditioning to relate to our experience as this very paltry skimming and oversimplification of what is here. And by doing so, we cut ourselves off from noticing the lusciousness, the richness, and most importantly, the indeterminacy of what is here. The fact that you cannot completely determine exactly what anything is, far from being a problem or a shortcoming, is a great opportunity. Because how can you be stuck in an indeterminacy? How can you be trapped in an indeterminacy? How can you be limited by an indeterminacy? You know, how can you have an infinite indeterminacy be an impediment? It's like having a cloud be an impediment. And yet this is what is actually present. Noticing that this is what is actually present, noticing that you are this field of experience. For example, this is a good point too. You know, in fact, we were talking about this over dinner. We're identifying with our body. Well, I'm my body. This is my body here. This is my mind. These are my thoughts. These are my emotions. These are my motivations. These are my reactions. These are my neurotic personality. Blah blah blah. Right? It's all right here. Same old, right? It's right here. And we may be used to saying, well, but this is me, isn't it? Everything else is not me. This is me. So what's the evidence for that? Well, here's this present field of experience, right? And a body is appearing in this. You know, my body is appearing visually, it's appearing tactilely, right? This floor is appearing visually, it's appearing tactilely. Right? I see my hand, I see the wall. Is the seeing of this any different than the seeing of that? Are they appearing and from any different place? It's just the present instant of the field of presence presents as all these characteristics, some of which I'm used to characterizing as me, some of which I'm used to characterizing as not me. Is there any real basis for that? You know, is it just sort of a general grouping, a general averaging? Well, this group of characteristics is me, that group of characteristics is not me. If they're made of the same stuff, i.e. experience, or let's say in the case of vision, made of light, in the case of hearing, made of sound, you know, I hear my body, I hear the cars driving by. Is it a different sound? Is this like coming from a different place or appearing in a different way than that? They're just here. How is the sound appearing? Well, it's a mystery, isn't it? It's just here. Is it my sound? Is it not my sound? Is it me? Is it not me? Are these qualifications meaningful? There is a field of presence. This field of presence presents all this inconceivable range of characteristics. Even trying to specify the characteristics that are present is inconceivable, let alone the range within any set of characteristics. Specifying that is impossible. So we build an imaginary world of objects and conditions and circumstances and functionings and interrelationships based on the flimsiest of evidence, of arbitrary groupings of portions of within our field of experience, right? And by doing so, we orient to these groupings, we orient to these things, we orient to these entities, we orient to these circumstances and situations, but we aren't oriented to the field of experience, which in fact is the only thing actually here, right? I can see you because I can see my field of light. I close my eyes, you disappear along with everything else. I open my eyes, you appear along with everything else. What's the basis for saying you're any different than anything else? Me, I go to sleep, my body disappears at the same time as the world disappears. Where's the basis for supposing my body is any different than the world? Right? I wake up, my body appears, the world appears, poof, all at once. So these are interesting questions. It's interesting to look freshly at what is actual, what is real, what's really present outside the normal constraints of what we're used to thinking in terms of consensus reality, in terms of the implications of language, in terms of the implications of description. And it turns out to be very valuable to do so, because what's actually here, this field of presence, call it the field of your experience, is actually quite different and includes vastly different properties than anything that can be encompassed within a narration, within a description. So this describing this interpreting the world as being the way people usually say it is, the way consensus reality says it is a censoring. It's taking an inconceivable richness and paring it down into little puny, measly morsels, tiny little bite-sized averages. It's like drawing stick. It's like a 2-year-old draws a stick figure, draws a circle and a cross and says, "Look, there's mommy." It's like, hey, guess what? That's not mommy. Mommy's a little bit more than that, in actual fact. And this is exactly what we do. Well, here I am in Santa Cruz, we're having a talk, I'm sitting here talking. That's a stick figure. What's actually happening is this. What is it? I can't say it. It cannot be said. Just an instant of it cannot be said. The whole continuum of it cannot be said. No portion of it can be said. That's very interesting.